Thank you so much. And if I may request all the panelists to be on video now. And while we do that, fantastic presentation, really mesmerizing, really optimistic in terms of where things are headed. So thank you so much for doing that today. A great session. I just want to kickstart the panel, and maybe Mike, you've spent like almost 3 decades in the industry. You've seen all kinds of hype cycles come and go. I want to get started by asking you this question in terms of, why is this hype around metaverse, right? The term in the first place was created in 1982 in a book called Snow Crash, and augmented reality, AI, those kind of like enabling technologies have been around for a fairly long period of time, right? So why all of a sudden, Mike, in your experience, why is there this rush to be in metaverse? What is this hype all about? If you can decode that for our audience today, that'll be a good start to the panel.
Yeah, what I would say, first off, thanks for having me, and great presentation, Ido. That was fascinating. I think, to answer the question, I actually don't believe that there's a big rush per se. It's easy for us to imagine waves coming as massive crashing tidal waves, but the reality is that there's a series of waves that build and build and build. And frankly, I think that the pandemic has exacerbated, interest in the metaverse. We've all spent a lot more time in the digital world by nature of social distancing and travel bans and all of those things. So I'm quite confident that has had a big impact. But there's lots of other things I think that have converged to help generate what maybe sometimes feels like a crescendo. Technology advancements, right? Ubiquitous connectivity and cloud compute, advances in digital eyewear and head-mounted displays. So I actually believe that it's all of those things that are contributing to get us here today. And from an enterprise perspective, I think that there's no question that there is a tremendous amount of value. I mean, you can't watch the presentation we just saw and not be engaged. And that's a challenge in the world where, forget the pandemic, where we live in a global world, right? Where people are geographically, dispersed, and there's a thirst and a desire for connectivity, which was much greater in that presentation than, frankly, unfortunately, even it is for all of us on the panel here.
Absolutely, Mike. Tony, I want to turn to you because Microsoft in particular has been creating a lot of noise around industrial metaverse. You yourself have spent last 10, 12 years looking at IoT, which is one of the IoT and digital twins, which is one of the core components of how a metaverse evolves. In your view of the world, do enterprises really see value? In other words, right, what are enterprises not able to do in the physical world that they need to now turn to the virtual world, the metaverse, to be able to deliver value to their customers? What are the trends you are spotting in that sense of the world?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So as you know, we kind of like metaverse is a pretty pervasive area, and we look at it in like 3 segments. There's the consumer metaverse, there is the enterprise metaverse that Ido was talking about with teams, and we have a lot of amazing activities there. And our team, traditionally from the IoT side, we're focusing on the what we call industrial metaverse, right? And honestly, we are making it real. There's real applications, because I know earlier there's this discussion about a lot of hype around metaverse. So what we're seeing, which is so exciting, is that the metaverse applications in the industrial world is happening today, and we're doing it with like 30, 40, 50 of the largest enterprises around the globe. And then to more specifically answer your question, where these metaverse applications are very useful is whenever you look at, in particular, at process manufacturing companies that have extremely complex operations, all the way from where they source the material, the way that they go through the supply chain, the way they ingest it, the way they do production, the way they build to order, manage their inventory, do the distribution, get it to the retail. there is honestly like a million things that can go wrong. One example is like AB InBev. You know, they have a lot of variability in their business, and yet they have to produce the same tasting beer in 170 countries day over day. You know, even though the quality of water, the fermentation process, I mean, there's so many things that, and it's very hard to manage that. And today, these things are managed on a silo by silo basis. So what Metaverse can help is to bring it all together, where you have this digital replica of the entire end-to-end operation, and you have visibility of what's going on, and you can manage your, you know, all these, you know, anomalies that's happening in your business and adjust for it to get the maximum throughput. So that's kind of like one application of it. But the more exciting application is when they want to change the way they run their business. You know, so for example, we're working with one of our customers like L'Oreal. They have so much demand that they need to increase their capacity by 700%, but they don't know what's the best way to do it without disrupting their current business. So what Metaverse will allow them to do is to start simulating what are the things that they need to do to increase their throughput without bringing the operation down, and anticipate what are the next set of bottlenecks. So if they have an assembly line, you know, what are the next, if they add capacity, what are the next thing that they're going to run into? They can simulate it all and then get to the best answer, you know, that's possible to drive capacity introduction. So that whole idea of visualizing your entire business, maximizing the way that you run the business to improve your OEE, you know, especially with COVID, where you want to have remote operations, the way you manage the supply chain disruptions, and then to be able to simulate how to grow your business or to get better outcomes. This would not have been possible without Metaverse and all the tools to, you know, do that 3D visualization of the end-to-end operation, easy ways to simulate it, easy ways to catch anomalies and react to it. And then the ultimate phase that, you know, we're working on, that we want to get to, and we're doing a lot of that today with like technologies like Bonsai that does reinforcement learning, is to then get to autonomous operations, that not only we have this visibility and information, but then we also have autonomous capabilities that we can make, you know, ML based, you know, decisions in real time. Because honestly, a lot of these variabilities, it's constantly changing. It's not like you just pick one, fix it, and you're done. These things are changing millisecond by millisecond. So now you have the whole business, you can monitor it, and ultimately get to that autonomous operations that honestly would not be possible without an end-to-end metaverse digital twins modeling of the entire business to go forward. Really exciting.
That's wonderful. And I think one of the, so when we did the study, we spoke to about 100 plus large enterprises in terms of their investments on metaverse. And Ram, I want to come to you with this question. I think the general notion we heard from enterprises that it's a cool technology, it's a good area to be in, but most of the enterprises were not really sure in terms of the timing at which they want to seriously commit to it. In other sense, they were almost of the opinion that the supply ecosystem is always ahead of its time. The supply ecosystem, like tech companies, startups, they're all creating the hype, but the enterprises themselves are not fully committed to it. While there are some early pilots, early use cases that are emerging, enterprises generally want to take a little bit more cautious approach. In your view of Accenture's world, Ram, are you seeing something similar, or do you see that enterprises are really committed to truly be in the metaverse and derive value from it? What are your observations in that side?
Yeah, a great question. Couple of things, right? From the part of how enterprises are adapting, right? So one of the important aspects we are seeing, right? First part is, are the companies ready to embrace it? What we are seeing from the enterprise with the conversations we have been having with the CIOs, CDOs, and the CEOs, one of the things is the fear of missing out, right? A lot of people missed that cloud transformation, which happened, and people who adapted and, traversed into cloud journey at earlier stages really had the first mover advantage, right? So there is a definitely a mindset change that's happening, that we have to embrace this journey first, and be leaders in this space. So I wouldn't agree to that point that people are hesitating. There is kind of use cases which Ido was talking about, brilliant use cases he was talking about in retail. So use cases are going to determine how we are going to move at speed in this space. So that's number one. Number two, this is just not about, and the enterprises are realizing, this is just not about getting a product into the market, right? Every aspect of the supply chain, every aspect of how you run your processes, right? Every aspect of, how you bring in your HR processes, employee onboarding, every experience is going to change with Metaverse. And that realization is slowly coming in, right? Bringing it back home, if we look at it, and I'm sure, Ido's team was involved with Microsoft, we demonstrated the power of collaboration at Davos recently. And an interesting story, an airline executive who watched the demo came out of and said this word, right? Saying that, hey, this is the end of business travel, right? So employee collaboration is going to fundamentally be different in the world of Metaverse. And many of the enterprises, are realizing it, right? Given, one of the biggest things that's happening, whether, hybrid workforce is going to continue, will people come back to offices? Metaverse is really going to help in this space, and we have already seen it in Accenture, right? And two parts, and I want to, grab what Ido said as well in this one. One is, inside Accenture, we are, in the process of onboarding close to 150,000 people through, Metaverse, right? So last year alone, we shipped around 60,000 VR headset, but that's one part of it, right? With one of the biggest problem is the form factors of this VR headsets, right? But what we are seeing is an immersive experience working with Microsoft, and definitely TouchCast was involved in it, is to see how we can onboard people and give the same experiences with their laptops, right? So that's what we were able to do. Today, we have created digital twins of many of our offices and ensure how people collaborate seamlessly as if they are working on the real world. Why I'm picking up on the topic is, it's just not, Metaverse is just not about, getting one part of your value chain. It's getting better products into the market, right? Getting your supply chain fixed very nicely, right? Compared to all the challenges that's happening in the market. And more important, right, how do you change your employee experience, right? As they come into workforce back, right? So there is an hesitance in some cases, but I know there's a follow-up question coming on marketing, which I'll walk through at that time. But there's fundamental shift in every part of the business processes. And I think it's question of time. And what we are seeing, at least the Fortune 2000 companies, they are going to be early adapters, and people who are going to be ready to adopt it very fast are going to become the leaders in this space, right? And and what we are seeing definitely from the CEO conversation, there is a quick interest in adopting, at least start doing some proof of concepts. They definitely don't want to miss the wave, like some of them miss the cloud journey.
Wonderful. So it looks like enterprises are running into a FOMO effect here. Marco, you represent the enterprise world as far as this panel is concerned. Can you keep us all honest and give us your unbiased view in terms of how are enterprises really thinking about Metaverse? Why is this so exciting? And we'll turn to Ido for the confusing part of Metaverse, but why is it exciting, if at all, for the enterprises at the moment?
I think definitely is very exciting. There are a couple of things to consider. Like before, I think Tony was saying all the enterprises are really reasoning in terms of consumer, and then you have a more like a way of working or service, and then there is an industrial part. Probably I'm most familiar with the consumer part. I think it's most exciting because, one, it's a new way you can engage with your consumers. So it's really about penetration and brand building in different ways. So you can target to gamers, crypto lovers, and community building and so on. The second one is you can definitely work on what we call trade across, right? Which is you can provide new services and experiences and new ways to monetize and create revenues while keep building your community. One example of that is, for example, what the fashion brands and luxury brands are doing, right? I was reading, everybody probably saw the headlines that a Gucci bag sold for more than in real life bag, right? And it's completely digital, it's a wearable. This is an avatar example and probably make you laugh, but there could be many in the future that we don't even think about, right? So it's the opportunity to create white space and trade across. And the last one is about loyalty and increasing your repeat rate. So what I just mentioned, which is today you are like more on the, as a brand building, you are kind of positioning your brands on a funnel to, sell and close and increase your closure rate. Tomorrow, I think the mindset shift is you want to reward early users, transform them into brand ambassadors, and create a community that will support and generate a virtuous and halo effect, right? So I think these are the three fantastic changes that are very exciting for brands that want to be creative and have a lot of opportunities.
So you are giving a thumbs up to Metaverse in that sense, right? So
absolutely, and Web3 in general, right? So Metaverse as an immersive, but Web3 as a broader concept, I think is very exciting for brands in the future.
So Ido, I want to come to you and congrats again on a great presentation. You did talk about this being an exciting as well as a confusing space, right? In your view of the enterprises, what are the top 2 or 3 confusions or challenges companies really run into, and what can they do about those challenges, Ido, in your view?
Thank you. I would add, before I jump back into that topic, that we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg, and firms like yours and others are writing these amazing thought leadership pieces that are very in depth and are really looking at it from a lot of different lenses. But most of the lenses we're using are based on the technology we've had maybe until now. But technology is accelerating at such a rapid clip that the things that are coming are just fundamentally going to shift and change many things that will happen in this environment. Specifically, I'm referring to the AI revolution that's picking up steam in incredible speed. So when we think about the metaverse at TouchCast, we don't think about just an alternative 3-dimensional model or environment. We also think about all of the knowledge and the content that flows in that environment, and very much think that the future of the metaverse is not a function of 3D geometry that is 3-dimensional, but rather the term embedding, which comes from AI, embedding our reality into this new fabric. So we're really, and when you look at machine learning and everything that's happening, and the work done at Microsoft Reinforced Learning, digital twins, and elsewhere, it really is remarkable what is about to happen. So we're just starting to set the table. The confusion for me, primarily, number one, revolves around the need for VR headsets as an entry point into the metaverse. The metaverse is hopefully, for those of you that saw the keynote prior, is an environment in which you can communicate from as well, even without the need for you to be in it as an avatar. So that's a second confusion, that avatar is the way you consume metaverse. And when you put yourself behind an avatar, you're losing many hundreds of thousands of years of evolution and communication skills and things that we do when we speak that you just can't get from an avatar. And you don't want to lose when you have use cases like teaching, helping, selling. So there's those fundamental, I think a kind of naive view of what metaverse is, which is someone with a VR headset looking at wonky avatars moving around like cartoon characters. And again, if you look at the type of work that we're doing with our partners, you can appreciate that that's not what it is. It is creating an alternative environment for us to basically transact, solve problems together in ways that exceed what we can do physically. And I have this experience daily when I use this technology to communicate, like the responses I got from this fine group. I feel it really elevates me. And a lot of times in communication technologies in the digital era, they actually do the opposite, right? They're limiting our ability to communicate. And this is actually an empowering force multiplier for my ability to be effective in communicating my ideas. And that is the fabric of our society and of business, is in a world of competition of ideas, you want to have the tools to be able to communicate more efficiently. And through that lens, when you start thinking about this as a fundamental communication technology, as opposed to a hype cycle, you start understanding and unearthing all these use cases that will have a very material impact on the bottom line.
Love it. Daniel, I see you've raised your hand. So
yes, I just wanted to add on to what Ido was saying there, that it's not just about the 3D world. It's not about the visuals. That's part of it, but there's something much more fundamental going on behind it, which is actually probably taken 2 generations to be realized, which is that we no longer think of things that happen digitally as being artificial. It's very much, and Ido used the word real, they are real. The emotions we have, the relationships we have, the achievements, disappointments, excitement are all real things that we can experience virtually. Traditionally we talked about the real versus the online world, and I say to people that's crazy. When are you not online? And what is not real about it? And yes, sure, older generations still have this prejudice, if you want to call it that it's through a computer, it's a computer game, it's nonsense, it doesn't matter. It's a video call, it doesn't matter, it's not the same as a business meeting, and that is no longer the case. And the younger generations, particularly the children, I have a 9-year-old son, there is no distinction of an achievement through a game or an achievement in a skateboard park. And I think that's what's fueling the metaverse. The idea that yes, we could have a panel session with Teams and traditional technology and video conferences, but we see the use cases we saw in the keynote. What's different there, I think, is what you get from an audience in real life. You have anticipation, suspense, you have that kind of bewilderment where you look around you and then you see everybody react at the same time. Those are the experiences that I'm saying are real, and that finally we can actually achieve through a digital medium.
Love it. Love it. In fact, I was talking to someone, and one interesting point of view came up was the fact that the evolution of technology that we are seeing today is the slowest that it will ever be in the future, right? So the future obviously is going to be a lot more accelerated in terms of tech evolution. And Brian, I want to come to you from an NVIDIA standpoint. You are probably the best suited to answer this question. Across the stack of metaverse, and Atul did talk about right from infra layer all the way up to experience layer. Ido talked about headsets, Tony mentioned about that. What part of the stack do you see the maximum amount of innovation happening as we go forward, and as metaverse becomes the reality of the future? What component of the stack are you most excited about from an innovation standpoint?
I think it's access. And so a lot of the things we're working with customers about, so just take like BMW, for example, they want to realize their entire factories that are operating digitally. They will have the physical twin as well, but they want to see it digitally so that they can, plan and dream and, make their changes there first to see what challenges they might have or what improvements and efficiencies and things like that. But in order to get there, you need to have access to that type of a model, that type of a world to be able to get into easily. And I think that the innovations that are coming to let people access that so that they don't have to have like a headset or specialty hardware or like even like a special computer, they could even do it through their phone or their tablet or just through a web browser. I think access is probably one of the most important pieces to be able to let these customers actually interact with the worlds that they want. But then they can get into like greater and greater amounts of detail. So I know some of the comments were pretty interesting so far around it isn't just about the visuals, although I think the visuals help ground a person, like, where are you? So in this example with a factory, like, where are you? What line are you at? Which building are you actually even in? But more importantly is, what kind of data are you trying to interact with? Is there like an alarm? Is there a perhaps a warning that says that something's overheating that you want to go evaluate, and you want to be able to at least virtually troubleshoot it before you actually figure out what equipment to bring down to the floor and actually go modify it? Like, is it just something as easy as like just a part change, or is it actually going to be a lot more involved and maybe a hose is leaking or something like that? But regardless of that part of it, just that pure access, that quick access, that instead of like waiting for a half an hour for this thing to load and get into the experience, you really want to be able to have anyone that should have access to that data be able to get into it quickly, be able to have the same experience as anyone else. And then be able to interact with it. So I think that the advances in hardware and how servers are deploying this type of thing to the cloud, and all the different mediums that people are going to want. There's this vast infrastructure behind it that is making that feel easy from a user's perspective. I think it'll take time for this to really roll out in terms of infrastructures and things like that. But to me, that's the exciting part is that it went from, so I have a CAD background, so I've been in the CAD industry for decades. And, when we started, we had like all these Unix systems, right? And those things were super expensive. So you only had a few people that could actually even look at the models. And then over time, the access to those data models has become less and less. And I think that's the part that really drives this, is that once you take away all the special hardware required, although there may be special hardware behind in the infrastructure to make it possible, the end user, the person that's actually immersed in those metaverses, they enjoy it more, but they can also use it. Then it becomes just a tool like anything else on their system. More like a spreadsheet. They can just use it. They're not thinking, oh my gosh, I have to go get this really expensive computer to be able to even think about being immersed in my world or exploring it and understanding it. So I think that opens up the realm of possibilities to lots of people. And then metaverses become just something that people understand that they'll be using, not a specialty item.
Awesome.
If I can add a word. I just wanted to mention that NVIDIA as a company, which is also an amazing partner, is investing billions of dollars in creating not just hardware, but also software stacks that the entire industry is leveraging to accelerate this revolution. And when you talk about why now, how is this possible? I think a lot of it is attributed to those type of decisions by companies like NVIDIA, by companies like Epic, that have literally, walked the walk and invested billions to get us to the place where there's now an ecosystem, both on the entire stack, that makes these things possible. Like a startup like ours, where 200 people would have never been able to do any of this if it wasn't for that deep, long-term corporate conviction that these companies have and their leadership. So that's one of the main reasons it's now, not just that Facebook changed its name, that the technology is ripe for innovators to gravitate, use it, and change how business is done.
Absolutely, absolutely. And another company, in my view, that's driving that change is definitely Microsoft. And I know, Tony, you have to leave early, but Microsoft as a company has been, at least in the metaverse context, has been playing a key role, right, at the infrastructure layer, the software layer, AI layer, even the headset layer, right? In your view of the world, Tony, the innovations in which part of the stack are you most excited about, and you're committed to which component of the stack in terms of making metaverse the reality of the future?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, honestly, metaverse, it requires, many different technologies, and, we're very fortunate to have the vast majority of it inside Microsoft, but we're also building there's two things that we're doing. One, we want to make sure that all these technologies, that even those inside Microsoft, it just works better together, so it's easily assembles, so we can compose these solutions. But at the same time, it's very modular and open source. So if anybody wants to, change any part of it, they can do that. But make it super easy to build it. And then the way, we look at the stack, obviously there's a whole infrastructure cloud part of it that, we're the leader in that space. We have the IoT PaaS services that sits on top of it, the ability to connect, to millions of devices, bring real-time information and make it happen. We're a leader in that space. Then there's the digital twins that honestly, we've been heavily investing in it, for the last number of years. And it's where we can create these ontologies for different industries. So as people want to go to smart airports, buildings, EV charging station, they don't have to start from scratch. A lot of that, we have communities where that, thing is there. And then we're building, the Synapse and all the analytics layers that is integral part of it. Then, on top of that, we have the Azure Maps. So if people want to do, 3D rendering and a lot of this stuff. And then we have Spaces. And then we have a lot of other capabilities on top of that. As I said, Bonsai, we can do reinforcement learning. and then get into Power Apps that makes it a lot easier to put all of these things together. And finally, we have all of our, mesh, and capabilities for the 3D visualization all the way into the headsets, if that's a way people want to do a 2D or 3D. So that's what we call metaverse, is all these layers. And then, of course, there is the Teams capabilities and everything else that we're doing on the enterprise side. And we're also trying to create a blueprint, with great partners like Accenture on the call, where we have this pre-assembled set of capabilities. So if somebody wants to get into the space, or if they're already in various stages of their implementation, they already have the digital twin, now they want to get into the 3D, capabilities, we could, easily do that. And then lastly, what I would say is, the ecosystem is super important to us. So we're investing a lot of time and energy to make sure that we have amazing partners, along the ride, with us, partners like ANSYS that can do a lot of the, physics-based simulations, partners like Cognite that can help us do, a lot of the data cleansing and, virtualization, Cosmotech that has AI-based, visualization capabilities. So, and there's like dozens and dozens more that we're, with element analytics and so on, that we're working closely that, one, we have the technology stack. Two, we have the solution sets with our partners that shows them how to do it. And three is all the partners that they could bring in based on their needs and do what they want to do. So that's what we're doing. And that's what our focus is. It's not just one specific area. It's like, how do we bring all these technologies, make them work together and easy to deploy?
Awesome. So let's change some gears here. And having understood the importance of metaverse, and looks like all of you are converging to the fact that enterprises are committing to this. I want to turn to Ram and Mike and collect their viewpoint in terms of how do companies really think about return on their investments on metaverse, right? How do they derive more revenue opportunities, more branding opportunities, right? Given the early preliminary work that you've done in this space, both Ram and Mike, what can you share with our audience in terms of how to think about ROI with respect to this kind of an investment? Maybe Ram, you can start, and Mike, it'll be great to get your comment as well. What's your view on the return on investment side of the equation?
Yeah. Before I touch upon that, right, the way I would put it is, the return on investment, the way marketing, I'll just pick up this topic and then I'm sure Mike can add a lot more onto this stuff, is going to change with metaverse, right? And, the way this whole Web3 is going to come into picture and why this is going to, increase very specialized advertisement, very personalized advertisement. I'm just picking up one part of what you asked, Praveen, right? And so we can extend it to multiple things. Now look at, the marketing part of it, right? Today, if I look at it, the winning company is harvesting data about you, right? And you have no idea where the data goes, whether it's being sold or how it is being used, right? Tomorrow, the pattern is going to change, right? The pattern for tomorrow for the winning company is the one who wins the right to read the customer's wallet with the permission of the wallet. That's what, with the permission of the customer. That's exactly what digital identity is going to throw up, right? And if you abuse that privilege, the customer will remove your access, right? So that's what is going to happen in this world now, right? Now, if I, relate it to the ads, right? So as a result, tomorrow's ads will be able to be more targeted and hyper-personalized, but with expressive permission of the user, right? And this will fundamentally change the nature of marketing, advertising, and customer relationships, right? Why am I pointing this out is, right, the way you're going to market it, that's going to be a significant return on investment, for media companies, right? For companies in, a B2C space, right? So that's the first part of it, I want to start off with, right? I'm going to give it to Mark, right? And then I can come back on the other aspects of it.
So I would maybe take a, if we accept that the metaverse can add value across the entire value chain, let me pick a few elements further on downstream. And most of my experience and the experience at PTC is with allowing industrial enterprises to create digital twins, right? Digital twins of their processes, digital twins of their products. Other panelists have talked about that idea. And if you have this potentially comprehensive, but in any case, high fidelity digital equivalent of, let's say, a product and asset, you have the ability to gain insights. You have the ability to study it and predict what will happen. And then that gives you the ability to ensure maximum efficiency, maximum uptime, schedule predictive maintenance when required. And that can drive significant impact on from a financial perspective. I think the key with everything we're talking about is, from a business perspective, to have a problem that these metaverse topics, whether it be digital twin or mixed reality, visualization, have a problem that has been proven to be solved by applying these technologies. And work with a partner. I mean, there are many here. It's Microsoft, it's Accenture, it's PTC. There's many others that can help you understand how to achieve that value. And it could be top line, as Ram was just pointing out. I think there are many bottom line efficiencies to be gained in terms of productivity and quality, uptime, et cetera.
Understood. And Ram, just to continue that thought process, right? So while people may have a way to measure the ROI, in terms of the playbook itself, right? If I'm an enterprise just not yet ventured on metaverse, but if I were to devise a strategy to play an active role in that, what are the 2 or 3 best practices you would recommend to an enterprise? I mean, Atul talked about a broad level playbook in terms of how should companies think about it, but in a more granular sense of the world, right? What are 2 or 3 learnings that you would share with our audience today, specifically the enterprise customers?
So, and I will pivot to what Mark said, right? While I talked about a little bit on the revenue side of it, right? So I'll split it into 2 things, right? For a company which is getting into this, for an enterprise getting through this stuff, right? It's just not about market facing. It's not about revenue, right? Let me start off with the employee stuff. Very nicely Mark had put, the cost function, right? With PTC, the kind of digital twins, PTC can create, or with the products, right? That's just a big part of what can bring in efficiencies, right? So, and I'll tell you right from the start of, and I'm bringing back my employee onboarding. This has been very significant for Accenture, right? And, in the world of hybrid workforce, where talent is going to become a big challenge for us, right? And there are people, and I'm sure you are seeing this in India, Praveen, right? People have moved into remote places in COVID scenarios. They don't want to come back to work right now. How do I get back to the part of collaboration and make them extremely efficient, right? This is a very internal facing issue, but this is going to be important to really, turn out really extremely good customer facing products, right? Get the R&D focus, get the innovation faster, right? So that's one part of what, really, internally, if I start looking at it, how I can improve the part of collaboration with metaverse, right? And this is something which is going to catch very widely. And we have seen this in Accenture, given the kind of recruitments we do. We recruit more than 100 to 150,000 people every year across the globe. How do I onboard them? I've been Microsoft has been a great partner for us. TouchCast has been a great partner for us in this journey, right? So that's one part of it, right? How to make your employees very efficient, right? And that, I think, is a significant part of how you're going to churn out better products in the market. So that's from a perspective of what I would do from an enterprise perspective. On a cost perspective, I'm getting a better employee experience. From a customer perspective, I think, a lot of, the panel touched upon, right? This is not really about, just getting one part of your value chain fixed, right? How do I get and design, get the feedback from the customers and, really make my products better in the market, right? So that's one part of it. The second part of it is definitely on the continuum. How do I really control my supply chain, right? This is going to be, back to what Mark was talking about, creating a digital twin of your factory, right? And creating a digital twin of your production process is really going to help you, get your efficiencies done, but also get better products into the market. That's the second part of it, right? The third part I want to touch upon, I think all of us in one form or other touched upon this one. Metaverse is not something an enterprise can do on its own. partnerships are going to be extremely critical here, right? We have been like in this forum alone, Accenture has been extensively involved with Microsoft, with Touchcast, with PTC, right? The partnerships are going to play a very pivotal role for enterprises, really wanting to capture this metaverse world, right? It could be in the form of, getting into the right kind of system integration, right kind of industry use cases as we get it into the market. It could be, the actual right technology stack Tony was pointing out, collaborating, with the cognitive of the world, Microsoft, us and Cognite, work together for an energy and utility segment, right? Bringing the metaverse to reality for an energy and utility customer, right? So that partnerships is going to become the third part of it, right? That's how I would put it. Look at your real cost and real employee experiences, which is really going to change with how metaverse get your employees more productive, nice experiences, get your products faster in the market and better feedback from the market, with the digital twin Mark was explaining. And the third part would be the partnerships, which is going to really help in accelerating, the world of metaverse and helping customers, reap the benefits of, taking through a metaverse journey.
Wonderful. That's awesome. Brian, if you are online, I think I just wanted to extend the conversation on partnership, and from your vantage point, you get to partner more with ISVs and tech companies, more than at least the enterprises, right? So what is your recommendations to tech companies, startups, some of the largest tech brands that are there today on the call? How should they evolve their own game plan, their own strategy around the metaverse opportunity? What kind of advice would you give to tech companies and services companies in this space?
Yeah, we definitely partner with quite a few, right? And so we at NVIDIA, we look at what we're doing as underpinning technology, things that help accelerate either different applications, processes, workflows, things like that. So big advice whenever we start to work with companies is really to be thinking about how to be more open, because traditionally, and I've been in the CAD industry for a long time, so I do understand this one, traditionally a lot of companies want to try to consolidate the data and hold on to everything. And I think it's okay in terms of like interoperability. There is, some point of discussion there. It's valid in some cases. However, the way customers are really looking at things is to how do they take a bunch of things and put them together so that they can operate them. If you think about it like a building and how a building operates, you may have built it in a CAD system, so it was designed by an architect designer. But then as it starts to has to be constructed, it's probably going through like a different company doing some of that work and the scheduling. But once you actually have it up and running, you have so many different like systems in it. You might have like HVAC, for example, right? You have your fire suppression systems. All of those things are running. They're somewhat independent, of course, but when you want to start to think about how does all of this fit together, they are coming from distinctly different companies with very focused value propositions, and that's good. But so we see customers trying to tie all of these things together, and when we start to engage with partners, we want them to understand that yes, they do see that the world is big, but they also have to be understanding that to connect, you need to be more open, and just understand that connectivity obviously is not free, right? It takes effort, takes continuous effort, but it's important because that's where customers are going. They're not staying in a static world. They now want to dream and think of all these other things that they do have, and perhaps they've solved individually. Maybe they already have a system that watches over their HVAC, right? They might have another system that watches over perhaps like all the doors, like your security system. You think about that, and then you have your cameras. But as they want to start to integrate those so that they can do a better job, maybe looking at energy consumption, or they're looking at as they have people coming through the building and they're starting to analyze the population in and out of the building in comparison with all of these systems that are working, how do they make that more efficient? All of these things are going to need to start to talk to each other. And it's not about like like moving the source of truth away from, say, a design system, for example. It's about knowing that that data has to flow into something else or in partnership with other systems, so that the customer can really realize a bigger vision of what they're trying to accomplish. And so that metaverse isn't just centered around an individual CAD model or an individual company's set of applications. It's really around this greater system that is built up. And I think as you go from customer to customer, that can really fluctuate even within the same industry. So that real message to partners is, you've got to be flexible. You have to think about what you want to be open. It's not about giving away your IP. It's not about giving away what you do best. It's about how do you enable your customers to be able to do more with data that they're producing with your software, as an example.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, Brian. And I think, Daniel, based on what Brian is saying, I would assume that, this whole creation of systems of experience and systems talking to each other and the openness of the platform would result into a lot of downstream opportunities for companies like yours, right? Which are system integrators, IT consulting companies, right? There are a lot of people in the audience who come from that background. What kind of sense of opportunity would you give to them, right? What kind of opportunities are available? What is the role that system integrators like yours would be able to play in this evolution of the metaverse as we go forward?
Okay, so I think it depends on the different metaverses. I mean, just in today, I've discovered more types of metaverse than I knew existed, right? Certainly in these industrial metaverses, which are very tied to the digital twins and the process, there's sort of the traditional roles that we've seen of business process modeling and all of the tools and all of the work that goes along with that. There's clearly the integration of the data sets. So as Brian was just saying there, people have got to share their data, the vendors have got to allow their data to be discoverable, to shareable, and so on. But then there's the IP restrictions, and that's where there's new opportunities also coming in, new technologies. So one of the things that I explored a few months back was whether concept of NFTs could be applied to this data, and the idea that you could have an industrial metaverse, as we're calling it here, where basically you would hand the NFT to somebody else's wallet, and when they had that in their wallet, that meant that they had certain permissions over the model, that they could see things that other users couldn't see, they could make changes that other users couldn't change, or that they had to be present for certain types of data to be visible, which is something that we find in the physical world, that, okay, we need the chief engineer to be here before we open up the box and this, because that's the way it is, or in the medical industry, there's certain situations where certain people have to be present before something can happen. So I think there's an innovation role, there's the sort of a traditional role, and then there's a figuring out, okay, all this heterogeneous data, how does it come together? How do we make it agnostic as well to the different metaverse platforms that could be out there? Because one of the things that companies don't like to do is get locked into a platform.
Yes.
So they're going to want to say, okay, this is fine. I've got my car plant, I've got my data on the security systems, the data on the sort of the fire extinguishers or whatever it happens to be, and I've got data on a production line, and they're coming from different sources. I want to know that in 6 months or a year or whatever it happens to be, I could switch from Microsoft software stack to whoever's software stack. So that's also a role where traditionally the systems integrators have been, because we can help you. We can help you with that migration. We can make sure that the plans are in place, and we can be vendor agnostic. I think when we move to the more consumer metaverse, there's a whole different ballgame where it's perhaps more at this stage consultancy. So I think that there's a consumer metaverse which is happening, which is not being driven by the large companies. It's being driven by startups. It's being driven by almost by social movement. it's happening, that people are spending more and more time online, and they're taking more and more, they're taking what they do online more and more seriously, whether that's leisure, whether that's gaming, whether that's social interactions. And they are going to start looking for ways to do what we do in our physical lives, which is have mementos, have souvenirs, have a selfie, have an heirloom, all these things that we collect and we put in our houses and our offices and say, this is me, this is my identity, this is my history, this is why I'm here today, this is why I met my wife, all these kind of things. You have these stories around our houses. How do you do that with digital experiences? Okay, how do you do that? But yes, this happened, but it was in a chat room, or it was in Roblox, or it was in a digital conference. And so we're going to want these kind of digital objects, these digital artifacts. And that's where the Web3 backbone, that I say, it's not being driven by the large companies, it's being driven by these small startups, is starting to put together the technology that says, these are my unique possessions, these are my digital objects that reflect that. And then there's going to come a stage where companies say, well, how do I engage with people that are very much involved in this this style of metaverse, from a human resources perspective, from a onboarding perspective, from lots of issues that will arise of how do you engage with them, how do you keep them involved when they're so fully immersed in their virtual lives.
Right. So I want to come to Marco. I think we are also running out of time, but Marco, given your enterprise background, the fact that you worked with Procter & Gamble for quite many years, and you drove some of the initiatives around metaverse that we're talking about here, what would be your recommendation to the tech world, right? To companies who are in the platform business, who are in the services business? How can these companies work a lot more effectively with enterprises like P&G as they go forward with their metaverse programs?
I think that's an interesting question. The first thing that comes to my mind is the concept of interoperability, right? And it was touched on right before, I think, by Ram. And by the way, I agree with a lot of Daniel shared. I think all these things are interconnected. But if you build the concept of interoperability and composability, which is now driven by a lot of startups, etc., I think this platform reader, instead of keeping all the control and having closed systems and a lot of barriers, etc., shifting the mindset and turning that could be very powerful, right? So I could decide to build something on Decentraland or on other worlds or whatever, and platform can help me to move around the experiences. No? So I can decide I do a piece this way, and then I come with another partner and with another platform provider or whatever, and I do it in another way, knowing that, for example, if they are both on the, I'm making it up, Ethereum or Polygon blockchain, I know that there are a lot of systems that can be really talking the same language, and I can move my digital goods if I'm a consumer, or if I'm a company and I am a brand and I want to offer something. I really know that the standards and things can really transfer from set of individuals to other. I can retarget it in another way. So I think this is the number one suggestion. And the second one is also linked to this, the culture of Web3 that I think it will drive the win in metaverses, which is rewarding the user interface, the user experience. So I'm fascinated a lot by concept of play to earn applied to enterprise. So share to earn, watch to earn, do and contribute in this way to earn something that doesn't need to be money necessarily. It can be a branded experience or a free access, things like that. So this is the number two suggestion that I will give. An open world, interoperability, composability, and all this linked by rewarding the users, being them enterprise employees or being them consumers.
Wonderful, thank you. Ido, I want to come to you, and Mike, maybe you can also provide some perspective. But can you shed some light on the importance of Web3 blockchain, things like those, right, in the metaverse construct? I mean, the communication stack that you showed, the mass offering that you talked about, I'm not sure how much of that is dependent on having a blockchain at the back end, or truly relying on Web3 technologies. Would it work on Web2 or not? What can you tell us about the necessity to really move towards the so-called new normal of blockchain Web3, or all of this is also possible in the Web2 non-blockchain construct as well?
It's a great question and important discussion because this is another area of great confusion. It starts with the fact that blockchain is one of the core vectors that's driving innovation. You know, we talked about the work that NVIDIA has done. We talked about what Microsoft is doing. Blockchain is obviously a very different type of animal. It grows in a different petri dish, and it's not compatible with our tax regimes and our corporate culture and legal systems. As a consequence, there's a firewall. The firewall is not a technology firewall. It is a regulatory and tax firewall that is preventing enterprises from embracing the tokenomics and the crypto space, DeFi as a means of growth engines. This is a really fundamental challenge. So for us operating in this world as an enterprise software company, it's upon us to build these bridges that will allow these entities to engage in tokenomics and leverage them in different ways. And just to illustrate how fundamental the challenge is, most of the dApps, distributed applications that live in Web3, require an identity system, which is typically your wallet. Let's say MetaMask is the most popular one. And that is not something that's conducive to an identity management of an employee. Like you cannot have single sign-on. There is no identity that's managed by the enterprise. So that's one fundamental area that we're doing work on to help create a managed custodial wallet that will allow companies to engage and leverage tokenomics. There are many, many other layers to this. But it's definitely a big challenge. The other area where Web3 will play a very significant role, and I personally have tremendous conviction in this, is the infra layer will fundamentally need to change. Because the reality is that running metaversal experiences, by nature of them being real-time streamed experiences, is very cost consuming. This is not as the same as putting your print catalog on a digital web page. The energy consumed, that in turn the cost associated with is inhibitive for growth to happen. So when we decentralize that, when we facilitate an infra that is leveraging Web3 technologies and blockchain, we can fulfill the promise of more democratization and a broader infrastructure where everybody's contributing to the growing decentralized infrastructure that's necessary to get to metaverse at scale. So there are many layers of challenges there. And you know, it also creates great opportunity for innovators, and it's a very exciting time to be engaged in this type of work.
Great. Mike, the reason I wanted your opinion on this is because as a company, PTC has been talking about spatial computing, metaverse of late, AR, VR in the past, but you hardly are seen talking about blockchain and Web3, right? I mean, in comparison, you talk a lot more about AR, VR and spatial and IoT and things like those, right? So how convinced are you about the role of blockchain and Web3 as you traverse your company into the metaverse construct? Are those important, or you don't care that much about those technologies at the moment?
Well, I think I would say I think that they will be important in the future, but I agree with Ido's point around the firewall that exists today. And in order to drive value in industrial enterprise customers today, we've got to play by the rules that they're playing by. So I think longer term it will become increasingly important, but today you're right. We don't talk about it a lot. There's certainly research going on into what we may be able to do there, and where the market is headed. But you know, today enterprise managed identity is the norm. So you know, that's what we embrace today.
Wonderful. I see Ram, you've raised your hand. So do you have any
points? And I want to throw the question back to Ido as well, right? Two parts, right? What Mark said from an industry part of it, and if it's industrial metaverse, right? It's a very different story, right? You know, like Mark clearly articulated, how do I create a digital twin, right? There's a lot of things, you know, on the production, on, you know, designing products, right? But I want to throw this back to Ido as well. What we are seeing from an Accenture perspective in retail, right? In consumer space, right? You know, Web3 is going to become very important, especially, the initial use cases is a lot of things that's happening on the gaming side, right? In the old world of, when you shop or when you're on a Facebook, your identity and the kind of data, Facebook or any, or Meta in this case can use doesn't need explicit permission from me, right? But in the world of metaverse, where there's a lot more privacy intrusion, right? Web3 is going to play a very significant part, because the data, whether my data can be shared or not, right? Am I going to give permission? Those things can happen only if underlying blockchain concepts are there or Web3 gets enabled. So I think Web3 is going to become a very important part of this value chain, is how we see it. But obviously Vito has been in the market for much longer. What do you think about the data? Because I think it's going to be an integral part, but it depends on the industry, right? For industrial, I would go with Mark saying that's not going to be the key criteria. But when I get into a retail or gaming side, this is going to become very, very important. I'd love to hear Ido's thoughts on this.
Well, I think like many things in our society, unfortunately, we all kind of live in separate bubbles and separate realities at this point. And if you've been seeing people that look like they want to jump off a roof recently, that's because they have a lot of crypto. And so, there's these different parallel universes of that some people are very much in that world and are exposed and believe and have the volatility of that exposure. It's not conducive to a corporate culture. And again, if we observe what happened over the last couple of months or last 6 months, you can appreciate why. Not to mention the regulatory and the tax implications, which are just uncharted territory. So that's why it's kind of like a firewall. So it's not about the technology. The technology is awesome and very useful, but there are multiple layers of challenge for consumers. On the other hand, of course, there are many trillions of dollars of engagement that are happening already and will continue to grow. And I think that train has left the station. So regardless of this incredible volatility, I think it'll continue to gain traction. But we have so much work to do to figure out if there is an interface. And there might be a world in which there is no interface. And just like the car industry replaced the train industry, there'll be a new industry of Web3 players that replace the current incumbents, because the current incumbents are incapable of embracing. We've seen how Meta and Facebook wanted to create tokenization, wanted to create Libra, and backed off because he realized that would be the end of his company, because he lives in the Web2 era and a certain level of governance and worldview. So in some ways, the stage has kind of been set for that to happen, and that there'll be new players, entrants that will eat away at market share from existing by leveraging that technology, which is inaccessible to a lot of enterprise, which should scare some leaders and say, okay, well, that makes sense. Maybe I should pay attention. Maybe I need to figure out how to enter this space before someone grabs market share from me without me being able to do anything about it, which has happened time and time again in the business world.
Absolutely. Marco, you've raised your hand as well.
I'm enjoying the conversation a lot, and I'm actually much more on the run side. I believe that the retail part of it is already happening with L'Oreal, Gucci, so many CEOs that are leading the way at VivaTech or other conferences. I do understand like what Ed and Brian are saying, that maybe the back-end industrial part, there are regulation and things, but I do believe that these are challenges that are going to be overcome, either by fantastic players already there or by new incumbents. But for me, that is the true revolution. So that I just wanted to, participate in the conversation, enjoyed a lot. But for me, this is the true revolution that will be carried by the retail, and everything will follow.
Wonderful. So on that note, I think we'll just wrap it up here. We're running out of time, but I truly enjoyed the conversation today. I think there's so much to unpack in this world of metaverse that every panel seems like, a lot of new learning, and specifically this one, because we had so much of diverse, backgrounds coming together and talking about this concept of industrial metaverse. At Zinnov, we would continue to track the market, we'll continue to come up with our points of views as it relates to metaverse. Our latest report with insights from about 100 plus enterprises almost ready so we will make sure to send it your way, and it'll also be available for free downloads on our website. So do watch out the Zinnov website space for more information on that. But I want to quickly thank all of the panelists today for being available for this panel, and more importantly, sharing so much amazing insights, so much experience about what's happening in the metaverse world. So really appreciate your time, really appreciate your points of views and candid commentary on this, and really, really appreciate you investing your own time and effort in defining the next generation of internet. So thank you so much. Thank you, Ido, once again for a lovely presentation, and look forward to connecting more on this subject of metaverse and learning from each other. Thank you so much.